So you're probably writing bad code if you're not doing some of these things I'm about to talk about. I'm about to show you some of the things you should be doing to write what's called clean code. So first, clean code should be readable. It should read like a book. You should use explainable and meaningful file names, class names, function names, variable names. Avoid shorthand words and acronyms, things like that. For example, instead of using PV, spell out the whole function name, processVehicle in this case. You should try to be consistent. Use a single word per concept that you're trying to get across. Continuing on that point, class names should be nouns and methods and functions should be verbs to describe what they do. So for example, instead of using paymentCardLoad, which is a noun, it doesn't really say that that function is doing something, but you could use loadPaymentCard, where it's a verb and it seems like that function is actually going to perform some sort of action. Also, you should add comments where needed to explain something if it's unavoidable, but lean toward trying to write self-explaining code. So if you need a comment, add it, but I would lean toward your code being more readable than trying to just put a bunch of comments everywhere. To write clean code, it needs to be purposeful. Try to follow what's called a single responsibility principle. For example, if you have a function named processCarsAndRemoveTrucks, then that function is probably doing a little bit too much. It's probably a good sign that you should break it down. And that goes for classes, that goes for variables, anything that you're kind of building up these long names with that have like multiple purposes to them. You want to try to get down to everything having a single purpose, a single responsibility. So keep your functions small and testable. That leads into my next point about clean code being very testable. So testable code isolates logic away from its dependencies. That's the database, that's a remote API, that's something that is external from your actual code. Code should be able to be tested in units, non-dependent on services. You should use dependency injection to pass dependencies into your code instead of directly integrating them into it so that later they can be mocked when testing in order to isolate your dependencies from the actual code you're trying to test. With that being said, you want to avoid logical dependencies where one thing depends on something else to work. Clean code is extendable. Utilize inheritance if the language supports it, where you're able to create child classes from parent classes in order to reuse some of the parent classes functionality. You should also utilize interfaces if the language supports them to implement polymorphism. And what interfaces allow you to do is to set a contract that a class would need to implement in order to use that interface. And what that allows is at runtime, the interface or the class that implements the interface can take a different form as long as it adheres to the contract of the interface. And that allows you to do some powerful things like mocking classes using the interface or having different runtime implementations of a class that uses the interface. For example, at runtime, you may decide that you have a vehicle interface, but at runtime, it may be a car or it may be a truck, but both the car and truck implement the vehicle interface, and certain things about that interface, the application will know will be there because of the contract. And also, to be extendable, to write extendable code, you should create modular pieces that can be reused, replaced, and or rewritten without less effect on the whole. To write clean code, it should be minimum. You should reduce complexity as much as possible and follow the Yagni principle. You aren't gonna need it. So you should plan ahead, but lean toward adding only the things you need when those things are required. You should also follow the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. So, for example, you should put repeated logic in a method, and you shouldn't copy and paste code one place to another. To write clean code, it should be maintainable. You should lean toward following the team standards or current project standards rather than your personal standards. It's more than just you working on it. It should be other people be able to maintain what you're working on in the future based off some standards that you all follow. You should also follow the known conventions of the language and framework. And you should create documentation around your code features so that it can be maintained and easily onboarded in the future. Hope you found this interesting. There's more ways than this to write clean code, so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Appreciate you watching and listening.